Welcome to the Money Over 50 podcast, brought to you by Dallas Davison and Michael Hogue from Money Over 50 Financial Advisors. This information is general in nature and does not take into account your objectives, financial situation, or needs. Therefore, you should consider whether the information is appropriate for you and your personal circumstances. If you require personal advice, please contact Money Over 50 Financial Advisors. Here are your hosts, Dallas Davison and Michael Hogue.
Welcome to Money Over 50 with Dallas and Michael. Do you know how long shares have been around for?
Thanks, Michael. This idea or this topic came to me the other day. I realised I've had a similar conversation many times, and it's comes off the back of, as we've talked about. I think we've recorded about 260 episodes of this podcast. I think in probably 100 of them we've talked about the need for most people leading up to and throughout your retirement to own a part of the biggest and the best companies in Australia and around the world as the main asset class that you likely need to own in order to provide the returns that you need and the rising income stream throughout your retirement that you need. Now, what got me thinking about this is, to me, it feels like we're often talking about two different things when we first raise this with a client, because we'll say, hey, listen, there's different asset classes you can be invested into. You can be invested in cash, you can be invested into property, or you can be invested into companies. And this is where, you'll notice that we talk in this podcast about companies rather than shares all the time, because shares sounds like a number on a piece of paper or a squiggly line, whereas companies gets at really what we own here, which is a part of these businesses and of these corporate entities that house them. And so when we sort of raise that, and it's in our first meeting, it's never, hey, you need to do this. This is something that you are going to need to think quite seriously about, because some people just aren't cut out to be invested in companies, and they can't handle the volatility, and I don't know what those people are going to do for their retirement, because we basically go, well, you're not going to get where you need to be. I can't help you. Best of luck. But most of the time, how the conversation sort of goes is people's initial response is something to the effect of, well, but shares are risky, or but what if shares go to zero, or what if the share market goes to drops and disappears, or what if my money goes away, or there's a heap of different variations of this. And what I realized the other day is that there's something about the concept of ownership of joint stock public companies, which is what we're talking about here, which is if you own shares, anyone can own shares in Woolworths. There's nothing stopping you. You just have to buy those shares in that company off someone else who owns them currently. But they're open to the public. Like, anyone can own these things. And they're owned jointly. It's basically, there are X amount of shares outstanding. You buy those shares, you are entitled to, as a shareholder, that portion of that business, of that company. There's something about it in our minds that's super tangible, and you go, yes. I own a portion of Woolworths. When I go to the shop, I'm the part owner of this shop. I should be standing out the front greeting people and saying, thanks for your business, like a good restaurant. But when we talk about property, people never say, if you were to say to people, hey, you probably need to own 10 residential properties for your retirement, people never go, what if those houses disappear? Because it's so tangible to them, and they know that the concept of a house and of people needing shelter has been around since for 30, 40,000 years now. People have always needed shelter. People have needed somewhere to live. Housing as an asset class cannot go away.
My kids are fascinated by tsunamis at the moment. So houses can absolutely, from the footage that I've seen on their iPads.
Now, so this is a really
the houses can go away.
Houses can go away. The need for housing cannot go away.
No. Yeah.
So and the same thing applies with companies. So an individual company. So Woolworths, as that example, Woolworths may well go bankrupt in 10 years' time. Like I have no market call here on whether you should buy Woolworths shares. That's not what this is about. But people are going to need to buy groceries for forever until basically until we get zapped into the matrix and we're part of the machine. We are going to need to buy goods and services to basically keep us alive and to do the things that we want to do. No one goes to Woolworths. People go to Woolworths, for example, and go, well, I need to buy food the same as I needed to buy food 40 years ago when I was 15, and the same that I'll need to buy food when I'm 85. Maybe the need will go down slightly, but I'll always need to buy food. But then when you talk about owning a part of companies like Woolworths, for example, people go, what if that goes to zero? What if that goes away? And I think that's the one of the things that got me thinking about this is which is a genuine question. It's not a smart aleck response about do you have any idea how long shares have been around for? Is human needs have existed forever. Since human needs and desires have existed since we climbed out of the oceans as an amoeba. Businesses and productive enterprise has been around since the market-based system became a thing. Since we went from hunter-gatherer societies to settled agricultural societies, people have traded, for things and for things that they desired. Businesses and productive enterprise has been around since the beginning of mankind. We know that. I think we intuitively get that if I want food, I can trade something for that food. Yeah. Where I think, and I might be wrong here, but where I think the link here falls down is we know that people have always wanted food. We know they've always traded something to get food. In the last couple of thousand years, it's been money. You trade money to get food. People know that there's always going to be someone who can sell you food. What I don't think they trust is the concept of a corporation or a company or whatever words people use around this. It's somehow seen as this amorphous thing that can just go away like that. And that's, I think, the point. I'll use an example here, but that's, I think, the point that I find really interesting is if you think about that as that company or that entity just exists to service a need that human beings have, the need can't go away.
No,
it cannot go away, and the someone somewhere supplying that need will never go away. Yes, and in our modern world, it is joint stock public companies that provide a lot of those needs. That isn't going away. Now, the individual company might, but a company providing that good or that service to the average consumer is, I think, going to be around.
It's not going away.
It's not going away.
It's not going away.
Now, feel free to explain in more detail any of those things on my rant that I have I've brushed over.
So to answer your question,
you do know
companies have been around for over 400 years.
Yep.
So the first recorded public ownership of a company, of a limited liability company, I'll come back to that, is the Dutch East India Company in 1602. Yep. Let's start with the need first, then the value add.
Yep.
So it's quite simple. The East had all the spices. Yep. The West needed them.
Yep.
So the value add, quite simply, was we need to get some ships to sail to the East to buy some spices, and then we bring them back to the Europe, and we sell them for a significant markup.
Yep.
Now, in order to get the money to do that, the Dutch East India Company was formed. It's largely known as it's held as the first private company that was publicly listed.
Yes.
Ever. So it was 1602. Yeah. And what happened is that they actually needed money.
Yeah.
The government could have funded it. They decided to privatize it and to make a publicly listed company.
There's a couple of phrases that they when you read Wikipedia articles about these things, what they the words they use there, it was the first joint stock, which is one thing, limited liability, which is another thing, public company.
Public company. That's right. Yep.
So if we pull those things apart, as as you just mentioned there, the value add of, again, people had been going to the east to get spices for hundreds of years by that point. That wasn't a new thing. That need was there. The supply was at the other end. The demand was where they were. That was why they were doing that thing. The new thing and the value add in this case was the company structure, the entity that carried on that business.
Yes.
So we pull those things apart. Joint stock just means that it was owned by more than one people. The stock of of that company was owned jointly by many different people. It wasn't one person who owned that entity or that owned everything. So joint stock, limited liability, which you touched on before. This was really the genius of the company structure, which is that my liability was limited to the amount of capital that I had put into that. And this is why
this is important.
This is important, especially when it comes to shipping, because if you send a ship with 300 sailors in around the world, and they all get and that ship gets swamped and they all die, what you don't want is all of their widows and children coming around to your house and knocking on the door and saying, "Hey, you owe us a lifetime pension because now we've lost our provider for the family." The limited liability meant that you put your money in to fund this expedition or to fund this trip, and what then happened was that your liability was limited to the amount that went in. So you put that money in, you could lose all of your money.
You could lose all that,
but no one could come after you for more than what you'd put in.
And it's only money.
It's only money. Yeah, so you weren't on the hook for your life. You weren't sailing for 3 months around the world. So
now without digressing too much, that's a diversifiable risk now.
Exactly. So that was the
easily
point.
diversified.
That was the point.
At the time, it wasn't necessarily because there was only one company.
Yes.
But limited liability is very, very important, and that carries true today.
Yes.
So the shares in companies that you buy listed on the Australian Stock Exchange or the New York Stock Exchange or any of the big they're limited liability companies.
Yes.
You cannot be held if someone does something and the company gets sued. You could lose what you put into the company. You can't be held accountable for that. They can't come at your other assets. They can't come at you, which is different to a private company where you have directors, and you have directors of a public company as well, who are responsible for those things. But as the common shareholder of that, you are not responsible.
Yeah, which is an interesting one because I don't think that would make people feel better. If you
I can lose everything.
What's the worst that could happen? You can only lose what you put in. They go, that sounds terrible.
Well, this is an interesting one, Dallas, because you mentioned before people consuming groceries is not going away. Well, then you diversify away from owning Woolworths.
Yes,
that's easy to do.
If you own Coles,
you own Coles and you own as many supermarket chains as you can.
Yeah.
So you get, if Woolworths goes broke, it would generally be through mismanagement. Because the demand is there. It's not like the people that were walking into Woolworths won't walk into one of the other supermarkets you own,
or get their
the following
online,
day.
or they get their food somewhere.
So that's a diversifiable risk. One of the things that just occurred to me is that over 400 years ago, the first publicly listed limited liability joint stock company was born. If you fast forward to where we are now, where we have so many thousands of companies, just in Australia, let alone around the world. And if you look at the value of all of those companies compared to the value of the Dutch East India Company when it first got started, you can get a picture in your head of the value. Now, denying the progress of that is a little bit like denying the progress of medicine.
Yes.
In the last. And I don't talk to crazy people.
No.
So if you deny the progress of medicine over that period of time, I'm just not interested in having a conversation.
No, that's right. Yep.
So because we're going to be going around in circles. I think most people, if not all of our listeners, would be able to conceptually picture that. There is no risk in that. There is volatility. Well, there is no risk if you're diversified away.
That diversified word is the key, and that's So the last thing you mentioned, they're publicly listed. The other thing that is, and I'm not enough of a historian to know which of these. So all of these things have been done at different times, and you can have some but not the other. The publicly listed thing is the key here as well, because if it's publicly listed, what that means is that anyone can buy shares. So if you've got a private company, if you want to own shares in a private company, they can not let you be a part owner of that company. That's what happens
Absolutely.
in most small businesses. You can't go to your local financial planner or your local electrician and say, "Hey, you need to sell me shares of your business." It's not how it works. But the public listing part of it, and the fact that they were publicly traded, meant that you could very easily diversify. And this is the key. Like, people have always been able to diversify, and I'm sure that in the 1500s, if you were very wealthy and you're putting money into money, going into a ship going over to get spices, you probably didn't put all your money into one ship. You probably spread your money. You and 10 of your 9 of your mates got together and said, "Let's fit out 10 ships and let's spread our risk, and we'll all own 1/10 of these 10 ships. And if one of them go down, we'll all lose just that bit, and we'll spread the rest of it." The public listing part means that, and that's the bit that we've talked about before in our podcast about being able to buy companies at the push of a button. We really take that for granted. Like, there's no one in charge of Woolworths who's saying, "No, Dallas, you can't buy."
It's an amazing thing when you think of it like that.
Yeah.
So anyone, without knowing anything about that company, and without having to spend any of their own physical time learning about that company, and you can actually own and benefit from the profits of that company. Now, that brings with it another risk, which is under diversification. Yeah, that's an easy one.
Yes,
that's simple.
Well, that's the point, isn't it? Because you can buy shares in the company Woolworths at the press of a button. So you buy those shares, and then you go, "Geez, well, what happens if people stop going to Woolworths and that company goes bankrupt?" Oh, that's easy. I press another button and I buy shares in Coles. And so then, if the company Woolworths goes bankrupt, Coles picks up all those customers, picks up all that profit. I've then made my money back there. So the diversification part there, it all flows in together. Where the risks that are attendant in people being able to own shares in these companies, the more and this is a lot of the movement over time has been what they call the democratization of investing, where rather than investing in productive enterprise being just the domain of the rich and the connected and the powerful, and I've got a mate who's doing this deal and I can get in on that because I know him and I play golf with him. Anyone can get in on any of these companies. Now, there's all sorts of different choices then about which companies, but our attitude is, don't even worry about making those choices. Don't even worry about trying to know someone who knows it. Just own a share of all of those companies. Companies as a structure have been around for over 400 years. The concept of human beings needing goods and services and productive enterprise filling that gap and making a profit to provide those goods and services, that's been around effectively forever. Which part of that do you think is going to zero? Which part of that do you think is going away, given that sort of a track record?
Thank you for listening to the Money Over 50 podcast with Money Over 50 financial advisors. For more information and resources, visit the Money Over 50 website, mo50.com.au. We look forward to catching up again soon.